We are so excited to welcome you back to session 3 of the American Innovation and Abundance stream. So count yourselves amongst the lucky. You are here and getting ready to make it happen. So this chapter of our abundance agenda and the conversation is about capacity. So we've talked big picture, we've talked to innovators, climate investors. Now we're looking at the machinery that actually makes it happen. So, at Climate Group North America, we've been really thinking a lot about that gap. So what is the narrative that we need in such a, shall we say, changing time? and how do we adapt, knowing that, honestly, every single day we have leaders who are taking steps forward, who are using their resources in positive directions and really multiplying their impact. But government is a really critical piece of that. So session 3 is really going to be focused on the governance capacity to deliver. So who are the people? There are policy leaders, legal innovators, local officials. They're not really in the conversation of are we, should we, what has to happen. They're talking about designing projects. They're talking about permitting structures. They're talking about finance and speeding up implementation. As part of this, you're also going to play a very important role for this session. So congratulations to you guys. You didn't even know. You are the live audience of a taping of the Sirens podcast. So that's also going to be a part of this conversation. You're going to hear from Carol Browner, who of course has many titles, but is our former and longest serving EPA Administrator, Jordan Diamond, President of ELI, and Vice Mayor Nancy Mateer-Bowen. And there will all be in conversation with the incredible Lauren Schulman on how we rebuild national capacity from the ground up. Please welcome them to the stage now.
Hello, everybody. My name is Lauren DeYoung-Schulman. Welcome to a live, you are the live, a taping of Sirens, which is a podcast, they used to be called Bombshell, now it's Sirens, a Bombshell production. In Sirens, we dig into some really awesome, super nerdy issues. The institutions of American power, which we define as the hidden gears behind the scenes on national security, on governance institutions, on technology, all of the things that we think shape our democracy, that are behind the headlines. All the issues that the insiders want to know about, the things that we care about day to day, but are not necessarily getting the big flashy stuff. Which it raises a good question. Why on earth am I here today? Because we want to turn that lens of the institutions of American power on climate action. I get to be here because I am a longtime champion of government capacity. All of the behind the scenes stuff in terms of government management, talent, performance, evidence, process, all of the above that in theory, makes government work, often makes government not work very well, but we'll get to that in a second. Right now, my view is that government capacity, and particularly the ability to engender trust amongst the American people, both a most overlooked engine of climate progress, but also maybe the most broken engine of climate progress. I am pretty sure, however, that Americans both want their government to work. They want it to be agile. They want it to be responsive. They want their taxes to be easier to file. They want somebody to answer the phone when they call Social Security. But they also want government to be able to act on big existential complex issues like climate. And they want that in a whole lot of ill-defined ways, and we're going to define them a little bit more in detail today. And one of the challenges that we'll get into is that all of the amazing ideas we've been talking about today, the big ambitious laws, amazing technology, big new policy design, all of that is incredible. And none of it works hardly at all unless you've got that government capacity behind the scenes, which most people don't think about, to actually make sure it can then deliver. So we're going to try to marry those conversations today in ways that we normally don't. So we're going to get super nerdy and dorky. If you're not up for that, just quietly exit. But if you are, please feel to chime in and cheer, whatever you need to do. Upfront secret that I want to be on the table for a discussion that I think most of the paths for real, genuine climate action have to run through deep institutional and systems reform in our governance systems. And if we do that, we open up from a super narrow, very annoying, fickle path to a huge, wide, amazing path. But we have to think about those institutions, if not first, then in part of a parallel package. And to unpack this, I've got 3 superstars, 3 winners with me today. Carol Browner, who I don't need to introduce, but I will anyway, Carol Browner, who is a former EPA administrator, White House climate advisor, and all-around amazing human. Jordan Diamond, who is the president of the Environmental Law Institute, and Nancy Mateo Brown, who is the vice mayor of Coral Springs, Florida. And we're going to talk about how all the nerdy stuff I talked about, how federal ambition meets local reality, what it takes to build durable trust between communities and institutions, and that one secret fix, that BuzzFeed list, that what we would do to make right now to make sure climate progress keeps moving in terms of government capacity. So I will stop talking at you real quick for a little bit, not for long, and then turn my first question over to Carol. Wow. Okay. So I'm going to ask you both the biggest, most complex question, but also the simplest one. You have navigated regulatory leadership EPA. You've been at the highest levels of the White House. You have done a million things in your career. And so I'm going to do the looking back. What's the one cool thing? Looking back, what lesson stands out to strengthen government capacity so that big, amazing, ambitious laws like the Inflation Reduction Act actually deliver results on the ground? What's the one cool thing, or maybe a couple cool things, that we should be focusing on?
I think the most important thing is flexibility. Yeah. And the government can be very rigid. And I certainly had my share of rigidity running EPA for 8 years. You know, it was always about getting to a sharp yes or a sharp no. But flexibility. And what do I mean when I say that? I mean, let's put everyone at the table. Let's have a conversation. Intel, back in the news now, came to us when I was at EPA and said, you know, we can't get a permit fast enough to stay competitive in the global market for chips. It just changes so rapidly. And so is there any way we could make the changes and sort of notify? And I'm like, well, that doesn't quite work. But we sat together, we sat with the community, and we realized that what we could do is get them to significantly reduce their emissions below what their permit allowed for. So they'd be well below your neighborhood gas station, in exchange for which they would get an after-the-fact permit. So it was a win-win for everybody. The community got something. They got less pollution. Intel got the business flexibility that they needed, and EPA got the regulatory assurances that it needed. And so I think we need to be flexible. It's hard to do in the government. People don't always want the government to be flexible, but I think it is probably the most important thing we can do. I will say, as a former regulator, and we're sort of talking about the role of regulations, it's important to remind people what regulations do. They create certainty. They tell the regulated industry and what to do. They also create opportunity for American innovation, because with every regulation generally comes the need for some sort of new answer, some new technology. And I can just look across my 8 years at EPA and look at all of the technologies that emerged in response to the regulations we were putting in place. Another round of catalytic converters, the list goes on. And so I think when we hear negatives about the role of government and regulation, we should remind people what it does: business certainty and create opportunity for innovation and investment.
Jordan, before I get to your question, I want you to jump in on this point of flexibility, because one of the challenges I experience in government is often that we have some amazing, incredible lawyers, and they are so good at finding beautiful ways to say no, and not nearly as good at finding amazing ways to say yes and let's talk about this a little bit more. So this is what you spend a lot of your life on. Can you build on Carol's point a little bit on this point on flexibility, and how can government reset itself so that it can embrace that?
Absolutely. It's one of my favorite topics. So I think there is, right? There's flexibility is a really tough word for a lot of people, right? Because there's a question of how do you actually achieve your goal? And also we're dealing with a lot of issues about trust right now, whether that's in institutions, whether that's a kind of across sectors, et cetera. So there is an element of needing to build trust so that you can have flexible processes. But I think there's also just a key element of timing here. How do you make sure things move faster while not sacrificing your goals, right? And so I'm a process wonk. When asked about doing this podcast, as soon as Lauren said nerdy, I was in. Right? Fantastic. Okay? But there are ways where we can build in my opinion, being more explicit about what we're actually making a decision on. And I think that's where we often go awry. We start throwing a ton of information and a ton of things into it without actually being upfront and candid about what are the trade-offs that we're explicitly making to actually come to a decision. So I think there is a lot of trust building, a lot of making sure that we are being fair and concise about the information, to actually make processes they can tailor, that they can be flexible, and that they can move fast.
Fun
Can
fact.
I just add something? I think Jordan made a really important point. We frequently it's
podcast
that
is
we
over
have to
now.
have a shared vision of where we're going, and you get that by listening to each other. I mean, we would find out at Superfund sites, yes, the neighborhood was angry that the site wasn't cleaned up, but they also wanted, better access to community opportunities. And so bridging that gap, having that conversation and that shared vision allowed you to find a more cost-effective cleanup plan.
I actually, with that point on listening, I want to bring in Nancy because, Nancy is local leader in Florida. One of my big hashtag life goals right now is to get people to talk more about what is it that people genuinely want from government? What is it that, and asking it that way would probably get blank stares, but there's better ways to ask the question. But on the ground, when people are dealing with the worst moments of their lives, the most stressful, or the ones that are most exciting, what do they genuinely want from government? So building on this in a climate perspective, you have been on the front lines of climate resilience and environmental justice and so much more. I'd like to hear more about your perspective of what it looks like, what government capacity, this like overall lens of government capacity. What does it look like when you're facing hurricanes or flooding or housing pressures? When people are thinking about what do I want from government in that moment, what do they really need?
They want government to show up. And my co-panelists nailed it, trust. We can't continue to show up for community if we don't live up to the end of the bargain. They pay taxes into a system with expectations that we are going to show up for them. And I heard trust up here frequently. It is super important when we talk about local government that we're building trust. We're the closest to the people. We know what their needs are. I live in the great free state of Florida, pun intended, where in actuality, when we're trying to build that trust, we continue to be preempted from doing what our residents has asked us to do, not showing up for them. When we have a hurricane and a severe weather event, they want us to show up for them in a way that they can pay their rent on time. They have public transit to get to where they need to prepare for the storm, to weather for the storm, that they have access to affordable housing. And these are all issues that are not siloed. They are directly connected to climate change. We have individuals who want us to stand up to developers when they're being pushed out of a high leveled area. Climate gentrification is very real in South Florida. They want us to be able to support them and show up for them and advocate for them, even when our federal government doesn't show up, hence FEMA, when our state government decides to direct funds to other opportunities. And so it is our job as local electeds to ensure that we continue to provide access to individuals in the room so they can share their stories, amplify their short stories, and feel empowered and hold us to the fire, our feet to the fire, and making sure that we're doing our due diligence. When we talk about capacity, it is super important. We don't have the capacity, and it's super important that we lean on CBOs, community-based organizations, to help fill in those gaps. I want to amplify and echo ICLEI, who provides that technical support when it comes to our sustainability office. I am proud to say that I created the first sustainability office in my municipality, hired the first sustainability staff, but we are a team of 1.5. So what happens when we need to move towards a more efficient and divest from fossil fuel, and we do not have that technical support. So we rely on organizations like ICLEI, organizations like FLIC, who come in and provide that support we need when we don't have capacity.
Nancy, I love so many things about your answer, but one at the top is we could admire the problem of low trust in government for hours. That could be the entire session. We could do 7 sessions after it. You immediately had specifics around here's how, here's why, to what end we actually think about rebuilding trust. And trust is so important for all kinds of reasons. But to me, in the climate world, it's so important because it relies on Climate action relies on long-term solutions. It relies on the faith that if you invest today, it's going to have impact for when it matters at a certain point in time. And Jordan, I want to ask, you have spent so much time in your career around building inclusive and accountable governance, which is critical for trust. And Nancy talked about the importance of what local institutions could do. And I would love if you could build on how do we bring lawyers and civic institutions and into this ecosystem to help, not just to bring them in, but how do we get them to be part of that trust building conversation?
I think there's building trust, like in our day-to-day lives, building trust isn't a mystery, right? How do you build trust with somebody? You make sure that you give reliable information. You don't ghost them. You admit when you make a mistake, and you don't turn into someone else, right? Okay, we need to make sure that you're actually being upfront and sharing the information I kind of already referred to, that you're actually giving the information that you're making a decision on. You're going to make mistakes, and you just own them, right? There's no hiding a mistake doesn't help. We're people, we're intelligent, and it doesn't help. So just be upfront when you make a mistake. Don't, that just kind of goes into the don't hiding, right? Don't ghost them, don't disappear. And there's only so much you can do about not turning into someone else, but it does get to the fact that these are relationships between people, right? Any particular process, although I have had many conversations that I later find out is with the chatbot, but other than that, most of the time, you're actually just developing a relationship with a person, right? You're not with a position. It's an actual person there. And so there is an element of really being aware of that and really trying to minimize the change in the system. That being said, sounds very contradictory, but I do think one of the challenges with our system is that we're not quick to adapt. When we see something going wrong, even if we can admit that, our processes do not have built-in mechanisms for saying, whoops, we messed that up, let's tweak it, right? You kind of start over. And that's really, really detrimental to the process, whether it's inclusion, right? Go down the list. That hurts every step of the process. So we have to build better learning into our legal system. I have my youngest turns 6 on Saturday, and I play a game with him, right, where we ask you earn a point for every mistake you make, right? And in life, you learn from mistakes, right? And he gets a point because and I do it too. Mom earns more coins than he does. But that's how you learn. That's like the exciting part of it, right? So I want him to have a positive association. But with most of our laws and most of our processes, that's seen as a negative. If you messed up, it was a failure. So you don't keep going, you throw that out and you start anew. That, I think, is one of the biggest impediments to speed in our process, is we have to be able to say, whoops, we didn't realize that was going to happen. We adjust and we keep going.
Carol, I'd love if you could build on this, because you brought up the importance of flexibility. And to me, one of the underlying factors around flexibility is trust. Like, you get the ability to adjust, to start over again, to recognize mistakes when you work in a trusted system. When you don't work in a trusted system, you have all kinds of incentives to slow down, to not admit mistakes and move otherwise. You have seen this world from multiple perspectives, whether it be from policy, from business, from environmental protection. How do you think we can better address this question of flexibility? Like, what are some of the bottlenecks that you think we can actually address head on, and that actually will not create some of the risk that we might see around removing some of those bottlenecks? And how do you do so in a way that continues to engender trust in the system?
Totally agree. You admit your mistakes. Hugely important. You also should admit what you know and what you don't know. And, there are lots of issues that we deal with where we have a lot of information. The policymaker may have enough information to make a decision, but you may not have all the information, and that's okay. And so being honest with people about, here's what we know, here's what we may learn, but here's what we're not likely to learn in the near term, but we still need to sort of make progress. I think that's important. And I think to go back to Nancy's point, inclusion, you got to put everybody at the table, and you have to be candid with people. It feels like we could all do with some listening, right? There's a lot of talking past each other, a lot of, I think, misunderstanding that occurs because we're not taking the time to actually listen. And I'll go back to the Superfund example, when we would talk to a community and they might say, you know what, we need playgrounds for our kids, right? That meant we should tailor a cleanup plan that made sure that soil and that playground was safe because children were going to be there. Another community might say to us, we want a parking garage. We don't have enough on-street parking. You tailor a cleanup plan that doesn't involve hauling out all of the soil because you're going to bury it under 10, whatever inches of concrete. So hearing what it is that the community wants and then allowing them to see that the government is actually being responsive, I think goes a long ways towards building trust. I just want to take a moment as a fellow Floridian. I'm from South Florida too, a long time ago. Nancy, you give me faith that Florida will make it. It's a tough journey for Florida, but the fact that there are elected officials like you is just really...
Thank you so much, Carl. Before we started, I told Carol I was fangirling. I was like, I can't wait. Oh my goodness, I admire you so much. So
no, but like that you stood up and ran for office, that should give us all faith that there are people out there prepared to do this.
Thank you so much.
All right, Nancy, now that we've delivered, or you've had these compliments delivered, now you get to show your wish list of, so let me start that question over and move step back a little bit. I think too often people like me tend to think of government, the broader public sector, as like, well, we have federal, we have state, we have local, we have civic institutions, and they're all very distinct and they operate in specific ways. And this is just one mishmash of an ecosystem. We are all doing our best trying to figure out how we operate together. But it is a really key question to me that I'd love to hear from you on the kinds of support, whether it be financial, regulatory, technical, morale, whatever it is, that you think local governments really need the most from their federal and state partners in order to help deliver those kinds of equitable, resilient solutions we've been talking about. And I know it varies a lot from administration to administration, but what is it that would matter the most from your community?
If I had my wish, I would just love a debit card that says, here you go, cha-ching, do all the things that you can. But
that's at the top of the next IRA. And then after that.
But no, all seriously, being quite serious, I think it's super important when the government does give us funds. There is not a, hey, this is what's going to, basically making it hard for us to report back. When you have issues, no community is the same. And I feel like when you're on a federal and state government, they think all local communities look and act the same. Our communities have very different needs. They have very different wants, and we need to act as if we give you these dollars, if you're within the scope, you're executing within what you're supposed to be doing, then have at it. Do what you know is best for your community. But when you have state and local government that encroaches on us, preempts us, it really limits us from what we can really do. A great example, ARPA dollars really helped with our infrastructure. We use those dollars to really invest in our stormwater infrastructure to help mitigate flooding and salt intrusion, which is something that is impacting our drinking water. When we talk about federal dollars and what it means to really support our community who needs affordable housing, our CBDG grant dollars help our seniors. They help us create 13 new affordable units in our community and say, hey, they don't fall within that MIA, but because we had a land trust, we were able to use our CBDG dollars to ensure that our firefighters can come in because they're a little bit over that threshold and they are able to thrive in our community. When we ask our government to allow us to be flexible around our ARPA dollars, around funding, we are able to invest in our local pantries, and they're able to give back in our community in a way that we're able to multiply. And so I'm asking our state and local federal government to stop impeding on what we know works in our communities and just let us do our jobs.
So I want to translate that into as we say, GovCap, government capacity language for a minute, because that was incredible. That was exactly what is invaluable for people to hear in terms of like, what is it we really need? So to me, that means that Congress needs to better write outcomes-based legislation. It means that federal civil servants need to feel as though they are trusted to deliver outcomes rather than have to face a compliance mindset. It means that we have procurement and grantee processors who are looking for that outcome, that result, rather than looking for the box check. And it means we need lawyers who are looking for that flexibility in the reporting system. And we need to find ways to hear and learn and measure from communities that are very different than the ways we do now, and about 30,000 other things. But like, that'll get the list started. We've got time for one more question, and we'll just ties all of this together. So just building on Nancy's point here, like, as we are in a moment right now where climate rules, climate resources, climate energy, well, maybe not energy. Energy today is incredible. Climate rules and resources are being scaled back or curtailed or limited. What do you think is the single most important step local governments or their partners could take in the next year to keep climate progress going? So one single step that they could take that would be most important to keep this going right now. And Jordan, I'll start with you.
Well, not being in local government, my opinion carries a lot of weight. But I will say we talk a lot about not changing what we're doing, right? Which there are the absolute capacity and like funding risk constraints and et cetera. But in general, I think there's often, when faced with a challenge, right, you're trying to be like, okay, well, let me try something totally different. And we're trying to help provide assistance and capacity so that people can keep moving forward. We all know kind of the pendulum swing conversations and how challenging that is. Carol, you referred to certainty earlier, and how impossible it is to get long-term solutions in place without some expectation of certainty, even if it's not perfect. And so it is a question of what can all the rest of us do to support local governments so they can just keep moving forward.
Great answer. Nancy?
That's a great answer. It's hard to go after that. But
You can add to your wish list. Keep going.
But the rest of the nation is new to this. Florida has been dealing with this for quite some time now. And what we've been able to do is get really creative with wording. And so while you are trying to wordsmith what to keep out of grants, what not to do, we've been able to switch wording around and also embedding it into ordinances. It's really hard if it's already a local ordinance to undo that. And so I think this is a great way for folks to move forward. Lean on your local government because they're the closest to the people, and then that you are able to make more strides on a local level than on a state and federal.
Carol, last one.
I'm going to go really big picture here.
Do it.
But it starts at the local government.
Yep.
Vote. The single most important thing we can do right now to preserve progress on climate will be to vote in the next round of elections. And what that means, I think, for local government is ensuring that voters have the opportunity to participate in our democratic, small d, democratic process. And I think there's going to be lots of efforts to try and somehow or another keep people from the polls. And we have to make sure that everybody who wants to vote is informed, is educated, and is able to exercise that right to vote.
These are all amazing answers. We have just a couple minutes left, so I'm going to close this out. First, by doing something I never get to do when I'm taping a podcast, I want to ask for a huge round of applause for our amazing guests. It's really validating. Maybe I should do this more often. Yeah, exactly. So Carol, Nancy, Jordan, this was wonderful. Thank you so much. If you have not listened to Sirens before, I highly recommend. There's several podcasts called Sirens. This one is called Sirens, a Bombshell Production. Secret sauce, only 3 women as hosts, only women as guests. Just saying, it's got some appeal there. I want to give some homework to everyone in the audience, and then I will let you get some coffee. I know after lunch it's a little much. As I said at the beginning, I think that real climate progress doesn't just depend on your amazing big ideas, though thank you, amazing big ideas, keep them coming. It depends on all of us insisting that reforms to government, to a government be capable of delivery, that government is actually showing up, that it is listening, that it is there at the hardest moments and the most positive, and that we invest in government as though it's able and capable of delivering in that way. So I want you all to do that, to dream big. To be very loud as you were a minute ago, in demanding that we strengthen government capacity and that you continue to believe that is the work that makes everything possible. So, like with all that, thank you so much for being here. Let's do one more round of applause because I can. It's for a podcast. Thank you. And that concludes our live taping.
we've just spent a little bit of time thinking about governance and the capacity of our systems and how those institutions deliver or don't deliver. Next, we're going to turn to finance, trust, and democracy. Because honestly, right, no policy or technology succeeds without community buy-in. And we have some really spectacular experts joining us for this panel. And so we're just so excited for Crystal Cornelius, who is reshaping capital through native CDFIs. We have Jonathan, who's going to be representing Bantam, to help developers win public trust on the ground. Sorry, Natasha couldn't make it. And then Miguel Sosa Mardomingo, bringing a corporate lens on jobs and opportunity, all moderated by the fantastic Michael Blake of Atlas Strategy Group.
Good afternoon, everybody. Hope that you all are incredibly well. Let me first and foremost thank you for being here, and then give a huge shout out to Angela Barranco for her incredible leadership. Come on, let's clap it up for Angela right now. There you go. Given what's happening in the country and the world, it is important to convey for anyone that is coming into the States from outside the States, anything you're seeing from the president is not who we are. So let me say that as a former elected, as a son of Jamaican immigrants, that when we talk through what's happening right now, we are better than this. We are better than this. We are better than this. So I am not going to read bios. We are all incredibly talented people. You see their names on the screen. That's why you have LinkedIn. And we have 22 minutes, and we're going to try to get through 6 questions if we can, which we will. And the framing of all of this is that intersection, right? Like, how do we make things happen on the ground? What does climate and democracy look like on the ground in a very real and practical way? So allow me to dive right in and start with Crystal. And as we were talking through earlier, and we realized our mutual connection of Jody Gillette. So I thought about that there. Angela can appreciate that there. What are we not focusing on when it comes to our tribes, our indigenous communities, the support that is needed and necessary in this moment? And how do we specifically support and collaborate?
That's a great question. Thank you. A brief premise on Awista: we are the longest standing native CDFI intermediary lender in the nation. So we've been working the past 26 years in very deep relationship and capitalization, capacity building. So looking at the mark really within how are we left out? How do we get put into certain climate initiatives? What I think is really interesting is tribes, typically, this is my opinion, but we still tend to be the most invisible of minorities. And we also have a sovereign status. So then that can be a little scary to lenders, or even looking at working with the government, some trust responsibilities, whole different conversation. But I would say our tribes have really been leading the way for their own economic sovereignty and their own clean energy sovereignty. So what do we find missing? Awista, I think one of our greatest talents is really being a collaborator, a great listener. So we bring those resources to tribes. If you want to start a tribal energy project and let's say, I don't know how, do I want to do solar? Do I want to do electrification? Can I do net zero? We'll find individuals that are vetted, essentially, because we also find a lot of times people that are working in Indian country, they can come in, they give great resources, but they leave and the knowledge is gone, right? So in looking at that capacity gap. So we're great at bringing that capacity in, but what we're really great at is bringing in funders, investors, and getting projects done. So I would say in that measure, our CDFIs, our tribes, other nonprofit organizations, once you know about some of the projects, once you see the financial stacks of these projects, and more so what we can do to really change, and each tribal community is different, but they are so willing, we are so ready. Granted, take away the government funding, we still have a viable pipeline of over $100 million in projects we're ready to fund.
That's right. You can snap to that. We like that right there. And things will only get better when there's a Governor Deb Haaland as well.
Agreed.
So just putting that out there, right there itself. Jonathan, let's talk through public trust A lot of times, deal flow does not happen, collaborations don't happen, success doesn't happen because there's not that public trust. I know y'all looking for Natasha. It's okay. There's a switch up that's happening right there. Y'all wondering what is going on. It's going to be okay. And so how does public trust manifest itself into success in terms of what we're trying to do around climate?
Absolutely. And yes, I'm not Natasha, just to be clear, but I'm subbing and I'm going to do my best. So just to talk about where we're building trust in terms of the work that we do, we help build solar, wind, and battery storage projects across the United States. And that requires land, and land is in generally rural, conservative areas in the United States, and that's where we're working. So that's where we need to build trust. And there's a lot, Michael referenced it at the top, there's been a lot of not great developments in the calendar year of 2025, but I do want to point out that in 2024, 95% of the energy that we added to the electricity grid in the United States was renewable. That number in the first half of 2025 is 91%. And we're going to continue to build clean energy because I'm sure on the other panels, the AI folks are talking about what they're doing over there. There's a lot of load growth coming. So we need to build energy, and we are going to continue to build clean energy. To do that, we need to build social license and get the trust of the communities in which we are working. And that means for the developers that are doing this, there's been a just 30-second history. It used to be pretty easy to build renewable energy projects in the United States. Permitting at the local level was more of an administrative box checking exercise. It is now a political campaign because the conversation around solar and wind has become tethered to our national politics, which, as everyone knows, is incredibly polarized. So building trust requires navigating around the disinformation around these technologies and navigating around the political polarization that exists in our country. How do you do that? You listen, you ask questions, you don't presume that you understand the community whose permission you're seeking to build a large-scale infrastructure project in. These are big. You've seen a wind turbine or utility-scale solar field. This is giant infrastructure, and it has a significant impact on the communities in which it's built. So we need to approach those communities from a place of humility, where we're asking, what's the economic story of the community? What is the history? What's the history of previous development? And ask them what they need first before we talk about the project that we want to build as a developer. And doing that with humility, transparency, and ongoing and frequent communication. You need to, developers, and that's who we're really talking about here, that's who is the tip of the spear to build these projects, need to listen, and also when they solicit input, act on that input. And I can, if we get to it, I can talk a little bit about some of the best practices there, but transparency, humility, early and ongoing communication.
Which is intertwined, right? There's no real way that we can have success in our native and indigenous communities to continue to grow unless there's public trust that happens, because we can clearly know for centuries there's been trust that has been broken. Right?
Very true.
All right, so into that.
We're very careful of signing papers.
Yeah. I would say you have legitimate reason to be, Between us, I think we can agree on that. I got you on that right there. Miguel, some of y'all picked up on that on this side of the room. So Miguel, from a corporate and a global perspective, we want to understand, how do sustainable strategies specifically lead to job creation in underserved communities?
So thank you very much for having me, and thank you, Angela, as always, for spearheading such a great panel. I hope I don't get too crazy in my remarks, but I love what you just said about looking at T's and C's. Just a quick question for the audience to answer this. I see we're down to 14. When I say the word a smart person, what are some adjectives that come to mind? Let's go quickly. 5 adjectives. Smart person, describe somebody. Describe a smart person.
Yeah. Thoughtful.
Black and brown.
Yes, it was Michael that was the only person that referenced color, ethnicity, etc. These are traits that we don't, no one told me academic degrees No one told me they went to Harvard. Nobody told me they worked at a Fortune 500 company. None of that. But yet what's fascinating is what we're struggling with right now. Sustainability is hard enough, right? We get up every day and we have to go fight against an administration that for some reason doesn't believe clean air, water, et cetera, are important things and universal rights. And we also struggle with trying to get funding to do things that actually have business value. But on top of that, if we take a double click on sustainability, the first question I often ask is, for whom are we making the world more sustainable? And unfortunately, more often than not, it is not for underserved communities. Now, the second question we ask is, for whom are we creating all these jobs? If we dial the clock back to the IRA, which I still think has some glimmer of hope still out there, the question was, who the fuck are these jobs for, right? What do you need to get a degree to go get a job? And instead of asking the question, what are skills that are necessary in order to work in the energy transformation? I'm very thankful. I have a master's degree or two, and I come from a family where half of my family does and the other half were farmers that don't. But unfortunately, they would not have the opportunity to go get some of the jobs that are out there right now. So I challenge you to answer your question, Michael. When you think about who this green energy revolution is for, this energy transition economy is for, think of your staffing plans. And if your minimum thresholds are that you need to have a degree from X or a degree from Y, are we missing people that might know shit that we don't? Possibly. So I challenge each of you. We are working our butts off to decarbonize this economy. But if you think about the opportunities that we create for others, the skilling training that we can create, and the design to bring an inclusive thought to more people, not only can we decarbonize, but we can democratize as well.
Woohoo!
11 minutes.
No, that was good. That wasn't as bad as where I didn't know where you were going at the beginning. When someone starts cussing right out the gate and talking about the clock, it could be a whole different conversation. I was about to go down right there, but that was tame. That was good. That was good. To crystallize here, and again, as you can hear, we're being very specific, very practical in this conversation. One of the things that Angela wanted me to make sure to bring up was how we talk through the ramifications of climate adaptation. We'll go to our next question for everyone. One stat I want people to resonate with: after Hurricane Katrina, in 3 of the core states, so Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, 40% of the residents did not return to those communities. Just make sure we internalize that. The dramatic shift that happens electorally, financially, community-wise, academic impact, et cetera, is all intertwined there. So in this moment here, and we're going to get through all of these, I want to do one quick rapid fire before we get to the final question for each of you. If there is one specific call to action you would have to people on how they can help your initiative and how you can help them, what would that be?
Look at risk differently.
Dive in more. What would that entail?
That would entail essentially not looking at collateralization measures or looking at how banks or regular investors look at investing in rural and or native communities. There's a way that we de-risk. There's very safeguarded underwriting procedures that are considered not customary, but we've shown it's worked. Our entire portfolio of $64 million is unsecured. It always goes out unsecured. We've had one loan default in 26 years. So in looking at what conventional measures really look at as a safe investment isn't necessarily beneficial to, and it doesn't have to be a marginalized community. Native communities are. It can be rural, it can be urban, but we need to look at all of that differently because it's not helping any of us.
In transparency, I couldn't agree more. I'm on the board of an effort called Redemption Bank, which Reverend Dr. Bernice King is our chair. We don't look at credit scores when it comes to what happens because you have to look at underwriting differently for communities of color. You can't treat it all in that same regard. Tell me.
Don't assume a certain level of information about renewable energy projects in the communities that we're trying to build. So, and what I mean by that is people who spend their time at Climate Week and other things like Climate Week know a lot about energy and the grid and what these projects mean. And, 2030, 2050, 1.5, we live this. The bulk of the information that most of the communities in which we need to build these projects have gotten about the grid and energy is in the context of attack ads in the 2024 campaign. That's basically, and it wasn't good, and it was not nice. And if we want to be able to talk about how these projects can be win-wins for the community and how we need to put more energy on the grid to make people's bills more affordable, because we have an affordability crisis in this country, there's a basic level of communication that the industry and philanthropy need to do in this country about energy and the grid, and what it means for people's lives, because these are actually really complicated topics, and we shouldn't try to explain all the things. We shouldn't try to connect all the dots. It's too much, but we do need to say nice things about this technology and build a baseline level of communication about this, because it just doesn't exist at this point. And I think there are a lot of people that kind of bang their heads like, why don't people get it? Why don't people get it? Because we haven't told them. Yeah. We really haven't.
And we're not communicating it well. I mean, you have half of the country doesn't have $1,000 in their savings account. So if you're not talking about how it's helping you save money and pay your bills, you talking about saving the world, I can't even understand what you're talking about.
Exactly. That's a Maslow's hierarchy of needs issue, right? And it's just about language, and I think that's a wonderful way of saying it. It's about communicating language. I was speaking at Harvard. A student asked me, could you sell sustainability to President Trump? I said I wouldn't even try. But if I asked President Trump, do you want to prevent Mar-a-Lago from being flooded? Yes. Well, let's talk about solutions. Right? So it's a value proposition, to your point. And so my ask of you all, my takeaway, is that as you're pursuing this work, which again is hard enough, and we're talking in an echo chamber here because I fundamentally believe we do believe in this stuff. But ask yourself, are you putting social up there along with environment? There's a reason why it's in the ESG. And when you're doing KPIs for the work that you're investing in, who is it for? And if you're bringing everyone along for the journey, it's not easy, but you will find that the return on investment and the business value from it is going to be better in the long run. And that's really what we're trying to drive toward.
Okay. We're going to get through 4 questions in 6 minutes. Watch this. Okay. Miguel, give us a specific innovation and or workforce development, supply chain innovation that has shown the most promise in connecting economic justice and social justice.
Go take a look at the organization called Year Up, bringing underserved communities to help put them in job placement, Google, Apple, etc. 95% retention rate in those jobs. Most of them don't have college degrees. Amazing. Personal note, I created a scholarship, University of Michigan, $100,000 I put in to bring underserved community members to study sustainability. So if you got money, go out, put your money where your mouth is, help bring people along for the journey.
You were doing well till you said Michigan, because I went to Northwestern, but we're going to let that go right there. But Jonathan, a specific tool, and I'm married to a Spartan, so, you'll be okay. But
Still love.
It's okay. Big Ten. So, Jonathan, a particular tool and a specific strategy that you have seen leading to accelerating a project approval?
This is not it's an innovative tool, but it's not a complicated one. It's ask questions, listen to the answers, and then act on the information that you're given. And specifically, this can be in the context of developers seeking community input for how the benefits of the projects are going to get distributed in the community, and doing that in a way where it's binding. And we have developers that are doing that right now in the form of community benefits agreements. You can also do it at a very simple, you don't need a fancy community benefits agreement to do it. We had a developer who went around and talked to every neighbor who could see the project and lived around the project and asked them what their concerns were and what they thought about it. And they changed things. They put vegetative buffers up so people wouldn't see things. They changed the project layout to account for the concerns of the community. And you might not be able to satisfy everybody, but demonstrating that you value their life and their way of life and what they look at and what they care about as part of your process, and building that into your DNA is something that everyone who's trying to build large-scale utility-scale energy projects in this country needs to do, or they won't succeed.
Excellent. Crystal, give a concrete example of how you've seen how community-driven financing has led to resiliency and public trust being strengthened.
I would just say, essentially, it's Owista's model. When we look at our past 25 years, we've created 30,000 new businesses in Indian country, over 17,000 first-time homeowners. Looking at stakeholdership, so many times we hear from our communities, you have to leave to find opportunity. We don't want to leave to find opportunity. We want to stay home. So I would say it's really a community development at the core lens of what these two gentlemen are saying too. Listen to your communities, find what the needs are, and build structures that work.
That was a serious mic drop. You're like, yeah, we made 30,000 jobs, and then you just kind of kept it moving. That was really good right there. Okay. Like it was just a casual thing, 30,000 jobs. Everybody's like, oh shit. Okay, all right. Give an example, each of you, of the necessity of a strong functioning democracy for us to then be able to have climate change be enacted.
In my point, it would really be bringing all of the essential players to a table, even if we have opposing views. That's what democracy is all about, and finding out a way that we can all work together. We can all mediate. We all can give something up to gain something of what that looks like, but can we really have an open conversation with individuals at the table who are willing or have the power authority to make those changes? A lot of what we're talking about and a lot of what these gentlemen and myself do, it's very simple in a measure of listening to individuals, finding community support, finding the outside measures, and government is a huge part of that. So this isn't a magic sauce. It's really working in a way that you're being a true human being. And that's what we like to be and that's what every one of us yearns for. We've got one chance on this little earth journey that we're on, right? What do we have to lose?
In general, the individuals that are making decisions about renewable energy projects are either elected officials or people who are appointed by elected officials. And if we want to keep building clean energy in this country, we need to make the conversation around these projects about the community in which we're building and about the facts on the ground in those communities. These are political conversations that have become increasingly untethered from the facts on the ground in these communities and the family's ability to afford to stay in the community and be able to afford the way of life that they want. These projects can be a win-win, but we're going to have to battle through the muck, disinformation, politics. It's what you need to do in political campaigns, and it needs to be done on every single clean energy project. And it's a lot of work, but we got to do it.
My mother was a Cuban refugee who fled the country at 13 with her 8-year-old sister. So democracy, that hits home. Having democracy enables us to figure out who needs what, where, and when. And if we believe in understanding that, as we've all said, then it's our duty to serve our communities, or else what are we really here for?
Let me bring this home in a very personal note. You know, I always, we talk about kairos in our world. Kairos is the other definition of time. The fact that we are having this conversation today, given what happened at the UN this morning, it is a reminder that we are on the right side, right? My family's from Jamaica. My full name is Michael Alexander Blake. I'm named after Michael Manley Alexander Bustamante. And my family would always tell us about when Selassie came to Jamaica and how people thought differently because it made people be empowered. You can make money and make impact at the same time. You can make money and make impact at the same time. Let's clap it up for our panel. Thank you, everybody.